My entire family chose a lavish birthday dinner at a 5-star restaurant over my children's funeral, while my husband and I stood entirely alone in the freezing rain, watching 2 tiny white caskets lower into the earth. My mother was raising a champagne glass to toast my golden child brother's 32nd birthday. They thought my grief made me weak. They thought the quiet, broken mother they abandoned at the cemetery would just cry herself to sleep and eventually move on. But as the dirt settled over my babies, the profound sadness inside me hardened into a terrifying, unshakable clarity. They didn't just skip a funeral, they threw away the only thing protecting them from absolute destruction. Follow my story until the very end to see the exact moment the birthday celebration stopped, and the devastating legal trap they walked into took everything they owned. My name is Maya. I am 29 years old, and I work as a pediatric nurse, spending my days caring for vulnerable children while trying to build a peaceful, loving life of my own. For the longest time, my entire world was anchored by my husband, Ethan, and our beautiful 4-year-old twins, Leo and Mia. They were our absolute miracle babies, full of endless laughter, bright smiles, and a pure, radiant energy that filled every single corner of our home. Every sacrifice Ethan and I made was entirely for them, and we believed that our little family was completely unbreakable. But beneath the surface of my personal happiness lay a deeply fractured relationship with my biological relatives. I grew up under the heavy, suffocating shadow of a narcissistic mother, Eleanor, and an incredibly arrogant older brother, Julian, who was 32. Julian had spent his entire life operating as the undisputed golden child of the family. He could absolutely do no wrong in our mother's adoring eyes. His achievements were always loudly celebrated as monumental historic events, while my milestones, my career, and even my marriage were consistently treated as completely secondary, minor details. This toxic dynamic extended directly to Julian's birthday, which our family treated like a mandatory national holiday every single year. Attendance at his lavish celebrations was never optional. It was fiercely demanded by Eleanor, who insisted that the entire universe revolve around her precious son. Ethan and I constantly swallowed our pride and attended these draining events just to keep the peace. I always hoped that having grandchildren would finally soften my mother's cold heart and bring us closer together. I never could have imagined how deeply mistaken I was, or how quickly their absolute obsession with Julian's status would lead to a betrayal so monstrous it would tear our family apart forever. Lumdi, a horrific drunk driving accident, changed the trajectory of our lives forever. A speeding truck ran a red light, slamming directly into Ethan's car while he was bringing our precious twins home from the park. Leo and Mia were killed instantly. In a single, devastating fraction of a second, my entire world was violently ripped away, leaving Ethan and me plunged into an unbearable, blinding grief that felt entirely suffocating. The pain was a physical weight crushing my chest, making it nearly impossible to draw a single breath as we sat in the sterile hospital waiting room, staring at the empty spaces where our children should have been. When the raw shock settled into a cold reality, I knew I had to handle the heartbreaking task of organizing their final resting arrangements. With trembling fingers, I called my mother, Eleanor, to finalize the funeral date we had just secured with the cemetery. Instead of offering a single word of maternal comfort or weeping for her lost grandchildren, a heavy, uncomfortable silence stretched over the line. Then, Eleanor cleared her throat and coldly revealed that the chosen date coincided perfectly with Julian's 32nd birthday dinner at an incredibly exclusive 5-star restaurant. She explained that the reservations had been made months in advance and were completely non-refundable. Without an ounce of shame, Eleanor casually asked if we could simply move my children's funeral to the following week to accommodate the party. When I told her, through tears of absolute disbelief, that the date was locked and could not be changed, her tone hardened. She flatly stated that the family would be attending Julian's birthday celebration instead of the service. Her exact chilling words echoed in my ears. "Julian is alive, Maya, and we must celebrate life. The twins are gone, and your crying won't bring them back." The day of the funeral arrived, wrapped in a freezing, relentless downpour that perfectly mirrored the absolute devastation inside my heart. Ethan and I stood completely isolated under a single black umbrella at the edge of the cemetery. As I looked around, the harsh reality of our abandonment struck me with a sickening force. We were completely surrounded by rows of empty, rain-slicked folding chairs. Not a single member of my biological family had bothered to show up. No aunts, no uncles, no cousins, and absolutely no mother. The emotional weight of watching those two tiny white caskets slowly lower into the cold, muddy earth without any familial support was a profound, agonizing trauma I will never forget. I clung to Ethan's arm, my body trembling violently as the priest recited his final prayers over our innocent angels. They had deserved a crowd of mourners. They had deserved love. Instead, their farewell was greeted only by the sound of weeping parents and falling rain. As we slowly walked back to our car, completely hollowed out by grief, my phone suddenly vibrated in my coat pocket. I pulled it out with completely numb fingers, expecting a delayed condolence message. Instead, what I saw made my blood run instantly cold. It was an accidental picture sent to the family group chat by my aunt. The image showed my mother, Julian, and the rest of my extended family gathered around a massive, brightly lit table at the 5-star restaurant. They were all smiling brightly, raising expensive crystal glasses of champagne to toast the golden child. Seeing their absolute joy while the dirt was still settling over my baby's graves didn't just break my heart, it incinerated it. In that exact second, my blinding sadness permanently hardened into a cold, terrifying, calculating rage. In the quiet weeks following that devastating betrayal, my family assumed my silence meant absolute defeat. They truly believed that a broken, grieving mother would just lock herself away in a dark room and fade into obscurity. What Eleanor and Julian completely forgot, however, was that the true foundation of our family's immense wealth did not belong to them. It belonged to my late maternal grandfather, a sharp, fiercely perceptive, self-made real estate tycoon who had passed away 3 years prior. He had spent decades silently observing how my mother systematically spoiled Julian while treating my family like complete garbage, and he deeply mistrusted their financial responsibility. For his passing, he had quietly restructured his entire estate planning to ensure the legacy he built would never be squandered on superficial luxury or narcissistic whims. He bypassed Eleanor and Julian entirely, placing the family's massive residential real estate holdings and the multi-million-dollar commercial building directly under a strict, ironclad private trust fund. That specific commercial building happened to house the entire corporate headquarters of Julian's medical consulting business, the very venture that funded his lavish lifestyle and paid for his expensive sports cars. When the trust was legally activated, my grandfather had named me as the sole, unilateral trustee with absolute discretionary control over the properties, corporate assets, and the legal commercial leases. Eleanor and Julian only received conditional, monthly allowances that were entirely dependent on my signature. For years, I had quietly signed the paperwork and authorized their funding without ever making a fuss, purely out of a desire to maintain family harmony. But as I sat in my empty home, staring at the picture of them drinking champagne while my twins were lowered into the dirt, I realized that harmony was a fishing. They had no idea I held their entire existence in my hands. Instead of screaming, crying, or sending a single angry text message to confront them, I channeled my cold fury into absolute silence. I scheduled a private meeting with my grandfather's trusted trust attorneys, walking into their high-rise office with a sharp, unbreakable focus. I didn't want an apology. I wanted complete, unshakable justice for my children. I instructed my legal team to execute a series of ruthless, entirely legal maneuvers that had been sitting quietly in the trust bylaws for years. First, we conducted a meticulous audit of Julian's medical consulting business lease. As expected, his sheer arrogance had made him incredibly sloppy. He had failed to submit his mandatory corporate insurance renewals and updated environmental compliance paperwork for the past 2 consecutive quarters. Under the strict terms of my grandfather's commercial contract, these minor administrative infractions constituted an immediate material breach of the lease agreement. I instructed my attorneys to issue an official, non-negotiable 30-day commercial eviction notice to his headquarters.
Yes.
At the exact same time, I turned my attention directly to my mother's luxurious lifestyle. The trust guidelines clearly stated that the trustee possessed the unilateral authority to revoke or suspend all discretionary household. Funding if the beneficiaries engaged in behavior that brought public disrepute or ethical violations upon the family name. Skip a funeral to celebrate a birthday? I categorized their documented negligence as an absolute violation of family ethical standards. I officially saw freezing Eleanor's secondary bank cards and cutting her monthly luxury allowance down to the absolute bare legal minimum required by the state. Within less than 24 hours, the financial trap was set, completely locking them out of the wealth they had spent their entire lives taking for granted, all while I remained entirely behind the scenes. The sudden financial collapse hit Julian and Eleanor like a devastating physical blow. Within 2 weeks, Julian's business line of credit was frozen due to the pending eviction, and Eleanor's luxury credit cards were aggressively declined at her favorite high-end boutique. Panicked and completely blind to the source of their sudden ruin, they desperately called an emergency family meeting, assuming a major accounting error had occurred within the trust management. I agreed to meet them, but strictly on my terms, bringing my entire legal team into the formal corporate boardroom. When Eleanor and Julian swaggered in, their faces were flushed with an arrogant anger. "Maya, thank goodness you're here," Julian snapped, throwing his briefcase onto the table. Some incompetent clerk froze my commercial lease and cut off Mom's accounts. "You need to sign the override documents immediately so we can fix this disaster." I sat entirely still, a cold, unyielding calm radiating from my posture as I looked at the 2 people who had abandoned my children. I didn't say a word. Instead, I simply pressed play on a small digital recorder sitting in the center of the mahogany table. The room filled with the chilling sound of Eleanor's voice from that horrific phone call, loudly declaring that Julian's birthday dinner was far more important. Then attending my twins' funeral because the twins are gone? Not being might expates because the twins are gone? And crying won't bring them back. Eleanor gasped, her face turning a sickly mottled white while Julian froze mid-sentence. My lead attorney then stood up and calmly laid down the final, ironclad legal documents, explicitly informing them that I was the sole trustee and that their eviction and financial cutoff were permanent and completely legal. I leaned forward, looking directly into my mother's terrified eyes, and whispered, "You chose a birthday dinner over my babies. Now, you can live with the consequences of that choice forever." 3 months after that final boardroom confrontation, Julian's medical consulting business officially filed for absolute bankruptcy, unable to recover from the sudden, forced eviction. Eleanor was legally forced to downsize drastically, selling her luxury vehicles and moving into a tiny, rented apartment on the far edge of the city, where she now lives in complete, isolated regret. Meanwhile, Ethan and I took the entirety of the multi-million-dollar trust funds and established the Leo and Mia Memorial Pediatric Foundation, providing specialized medical care and financial support to vulnerable families navigating their own worst tragedies. Through this foundation, my beautiful twins have left a massive legacy of love, protection, and light in this world, completely untainted by the toxic greed of the people who abandoned them. Set the freer year. Now, I want to hear from you. Did my family get exactly what they deserved, or did my revenge go too far? Comment below with your honest thoughts and tell me the city or country you re-watching from so I can see how far my twins' legacy has reached.